You have tensions between Netanyahu and people within the IDF over hostages. There are people who want to make a deal with Hamas to allow the hostages to go free. Netanyahu does not want to have a hostage deal with Hamas because if he has a deal with Hamas, it would anger the Jewish fanatics in his political coalition. So you have, what's his name? You have Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has threatened that if a deal is made, that he will leave the political coalition with Netanyahu. So Netanyahu doesn't want to lose the support that Ben-Gvir garners for him, that Ben-Gvir brings to him. So it's political, it's politics. And on top of this, you have this war going on between Israel and Hezbollah. This is very interesting, I must say. Very interesting because Hezbollah is a serious paramilitary force. It's not just a ragtag military like Hamas is. It's not a bunch of people with sandals and 38 revolvers. It's people with serious weapons, serious intelligence, a serious intelligence apparatus, and people with serious military technology. They have guided missiles. They have drones. They also have missiles that have cameras on the tips of them so that they can see where the missile is going, so that they can remote control the missile to where they want it to hit. Hezbollah has all of this stuff. Hezbollah is a serious enemy. Serious enemy. If Israel decides to go and do a ground war in Lebanon, you are talking about a casualty rate for the Israelis much higher than what Israel has right now in Gaza. Israel, a lot of Israelis, here's the thing, a lot of Israelis have this idea that they're invincible. And that's the problem, right? This is part of the problem. A lot of people in Israel think that they're invincible. And this is because of the propaganda machine, the big propaganda machine that says that they have this Iron Dome and they have the most powerful military in all of Israel and no one can in all of the Middle East, and no one can really mess with them, and America always has Israel's back, and blah, 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 blah. Well, the United States just warned Israel that it is concerned about a war between Israel and Hezbollah. And I want to show you guys this post. I did this post yesterday on shoebot.com. Let me just show it to you guys real quick. The United States warns Israel, your Iron Dome will not be enough to shield you from Hezbollah. Now, again, a lot of people, especially American Jews, a lot of Jews in the United States are extremely confident, and they think that Israel's invincible. They think they're invincible because they think, well, America will always have our backs, and Israel is this center for technological advancement. It has one of the greatest it's one of the greatest technocracies in the world. It has some of the best technological innovation in the world. And so Israel's good to go. The Middle East, and here's the thing, is a lot of people in the Zionist world, in the United States, think like Ben Shapiro. You know how Ben Shapiro thinks. Ben Shapiro said, what did Ben Shapiro say years ago? Ben Shapiro is basically a reflection of American Zionism. What did Ben Shapiro say years ago? It was his infamous saying that he did on Twitter. He said, Jews build and Arabs destroy. And what did he say? He said that Jews build cities and Arabs live in sewage, or something to the likes of that, right? They live in sewage and this and that and blah, blah, blah and all this stuff. That's how a lot of people think. A lot of people in the Zionist world think exactly like Ben Shapiro does, that we're the best and no one can replace us and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Well, here's the United States saying, hey, Israel, we're kind of worried about you. So it says here, this is from I-24, which is I-24, which is an Israeli publication. And it says here that the United States officials have serious concerns, quote, serious concerns, unquote, that a full-blown war between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iran-backed Hezbollah could overwhelm Israel's air defenses in the north, including the much-vaunted Iron Dome air defense system, 3 U.S. officials told CNN. So these American officials are telling the media that Hezbollah has the capacity to overwhelm Israel's air defense systems, including the much-praised Iron Dome. The officials are said to have apparently communicated their concerns to Israel, citing Hezbollah's vast arsenal of missiles and drones. According to the report, Israeli officials informed their U.S. counterparts of plans to shift resources from the south to northern Israel in preparation for a possible offensive against the group. Quote, we assess that at least some, unquote, Iron Dome batteries, quote, will be overwhelmed, unquote. CNN quoted a senior administration officials. An Israeli official cited in the report said that in a large-scale attack, Hezbollah will likely principally use precision-guided weapons that Hezbollah has been stockpiling from Iran for years. Earlier in June, Hezbollah claimed that its drone damaged an Iron Dome battery at the Israel Defense Forces base in northern Israel. Hezbollah claimed its drone damaged an Iron Dome battery. And I believe Hezbollah, by the way. I saw a video today on Twitter that showed an Israeli Iron Dome battery hit by Hezbollah. And the Israelis, of course, are going to deny that. Of course they're going to deny it. Of course they're going to deny it. Of course they are. You think Israel's going to say, oh yeah, Hezbollah hit our Iron Dome. The Iron Dome is the God of Israel. The God of Israel is not the God of Israel. The God of Israel is the Iron Dome. That's their God. That's it. That's their God. That's their God. They say the Iron Dome will protect us. The Iron Dome will protect us. That's what they say, right? The Iron Dome will protect us. Well, that's not what the Americans are saying. The Americans are saying that Hezbollah can overwhelm the Iron Dome. That's what the Americans are saying. And I believe them. I do. I believe them. I think that the Israeli military apparatus has been immensely overstated. I think that it has been immensely exaggerated. And one of the reasons why it's exaggerated is because the Americans get their jollies all up when they hear about this thing called the Iron Dome, or when they hear about the superior Israeli military mind, you know, the superior strategy of the Israeli military mind, or whatever. And so Israel has to keep up this image. It has to keep up this image to the Americans who support Israel and say, we are this very powerful military. We're so good. We have to work with you guys. You have to work with us because we're going to fight terrorism, everyone. And the Americans like to put up this image because they like to have this facade of a powerful American proxy in the Middle East. But here are anonymous American officials telling CNN, no, it's bullcrap, everyone. It's bullcrap. Now, I want to show you guys something else here. This is very interesting. The Hezbollah time bomb is kicking. This was an article written by David Daoud and Jonathan Schanzer. Let's not mince words. The Middle East is on the precipice of the most destructive war of the region's modern history. This war did not begin on October the 7th. It actually began one day later when Hezbollah, the most powerful proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, began attacking Israel. The Israelis, already on their back foot from the Hamas assault in the south of their country, struggled to gain equilibrium. The Israeli Defense Forces began with proportional responses to Hezbollah's unprovoked attacks, etc., etc. So it says here that tons of Israelis have had to evacuate from their homes because of the bombardment coming from southern Lebanon, coming from Hezbollah specifically. And it says here that the United States is what controls Israel. People think, oh, America is controlled by Israel. No. Israel is controlled by the United States. Israel is dependent on the United States. And without the United States, Israel falls. If America pulls out its support for Israel, Israel will fall. It'll put up a fight, but it'll fall. Israel will have to find a way to survive and get along with its neighbors. The head of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, who's been around for decades, he said that America controls Israel, and he's right. So it says here that Nasrallah believes that America controls Israel, that the country is merely an American forward military base. That's correct. Indeed, the Hezbollah leader said in March, quote, "When the Americans put their foot down, threatening to halt funds, Israel quakes in fear. When the Americans halt weapons shipments, the Israeli chief of staff quickly takes stock of his remaining ammunition." So the Americans control Israel. And without American support, Israel will fall. Now, I want to show you guys something here. I don't know if you guys have known this, but Trump isn't talking a whole lot about Israel. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. But Trump has not really been talking a whole lot about Israel. Have you guys ever wondered that? I've been wondering that. Trump has said that, well, there was a leaked conversation between Donald Trump and, what's it called? AIPAC. There's a leaked conversation between AIPAC and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump tells AIPAC, if you get me elected, I'll do all this stuff, right? He says, I will deport pro-Palestine protesters who are not U.S. citizens. He actually said this, according to in the leaked conversation. You can read it for yourself. He said that if you get me elected, well, how in the hell is AIPAC supposed to get Trump elected, right? If AIPAC doesn't have all the power that they deny that they do. AIPAC loves to deny that they have serious power, right? That they have serious leverage in the election. They say, "Oh no, we're just an organization that, really just is in love with Israel, and we love Israel." But they have tremendous influence. They do. They have tremendous influence because they have a lot of money. And they can do propaganda campaigns. I'm not saying that they dictate the election, but they do have a lot of influence. And Donald Trump knows this, and that's why he told AIPAC, if you get me elected, I'll do this for you. Right? And he said, I'll deport pro-Palestine protesters who are not U.S. citizens. Well, that's a bunch of garbage. It's bullcrap. How in the hell are you going to just deport somebody because they were in a pro-Palestine rally? How does that make any sense? Well, because they're not U.S. citizens. Okay. And so how is Trump going to deport them? He doesn't have that authority. So let's say I'm here legally and I have all my papers in order. I'm not a citizen, but let's say I'm here legally. I got all my papers in order. I went through an immigration lawyer to help me, and I want to take part in a rally that's pro-Gaza, that's sympathetic to Gaza, and that's saying stop killing the kids. What is immigration going to come and arrest me? Immigration officers are going to come and arrest me and deport me? It's a bunch of garbage. It's a bunch of garbage, and the only reason why Trump said those things was because he wanted to get the favor of AIPAC, the favor of the thugs in AIPAC. But Trump, if you look at his public statement about the war in Gaza, it's very interesting. What did Trump tell Israel? What was the message that Trump sent out to Israel? He said, guys, you got to wrap it up. That's what Trump told the Israelis. You got to wrap it up. And there was an article that was published on this, published by Vox. It was quite an informative read on Trump's position on Israel, and how it is not as flamboyant and as in your face as it was when he was first running and when he was president. You see Trump being more careful, more cautious, and not as loud when it comes to Israel. Why is that, you wonder? I think it's because the people who are around Trump study what Americans are concerned about and how Americans feel about certain topics. And they tell Donald Trump, listen, the obnoxious, fanatical support for Israel that Americans have been accustomed to for so many decades is in decline. The Ben Shapiro blue and white flag waving lunacy that believes that Israel can do no wrong, that culture is fortunately dying out like the dinosaurs. Thank God, because it was getting too much. It was. I understand supporting Israel. Okay, you want to support Israel. You side with it, fine. But the culture of being pro-Israel has been becoming too much, right? Has been, I think, too much. Too much. To the point where the Israel supporters will deny atrocities, and then they'll say, well, there's Holocaust denial. Okay, I'm not a Holocaust denier, and I don't agree with Holocaust denial. And I think that Holocaust denial is increasing. I think it's increasing tremendously. But don't go around talking about how Holocaust denial is increasing and then deny atrocities committed by Israel, or try to whitewash or make little of atrocities that have been done by Israel. So it's been getting too much. I think it's too much. And it's declining. It's going down. And so the people who study trends, who look at the trends for people's interest in current events, they see how support for Israel is declining. But not just that. Do you know what's declining even more? What has declined tremendously is the idea that America should go to war for Israel. Now, if you were to rewind back to the year 2003, and if you were to ask Americans at that time period, Iran, hypothetically speaking, let's say Iran has bombed Israel and is going to war with Israel. Should America go to war, boots on the ground, to defend Israel? You would have gotten at least half the country saying, yes, Godspeed. But more than likely, you would have gotten over half the country to support direct military intervention to support Israel in a war against whoever would be warring against Israel. Now the numbers have declined. The numbers of people who believe that America should go to war to defend Israel have declined tremendously. And I'm going to show you guys the numbers here. I was reading an article about this today. It's very fascinating. Very, very fascinating stuff. But first I want to read to you guys this article that was published by Vox. Trump did not say, Israel, wipe them out. Remember when Trump was first running, before he won the presidency? Remember what Trump was saying? He was saying, kill the kids of ISIS members and all that stuff. He's not talking like that. His rhetoric has calmed down tremendously. I'm not saying that he's not pro-Israel. He obviously is pro-Israel. But his rhetoric has calmed down tremendously. And Vox Magazine did a whole thing on it. I'm going to show you guys this article here. I thought this was amazing. I thought this was absolutely amazing. Check this out. So here's this article published by Vox Magazine. What Trump really thinks about the war in Gaza. Remember, what did Trump tell the Israelis? You guys have to stop doing this continuously. You guys have to end the war because you're killing a lot of people. And he said Israel is losing the PR war. This is what Trump said to Israel. So even the Republican candidate is being cautious and careful with his words when it comes to what Israel is doing right now. I find this to be utterly surreal. Utterly surreal. The mic is just way too loud. I gotta get this mic. It's utterly surreal, everyone. So let's read this for a little bit here. Former President Donald Trump hasn't said much publicly about the war in Gaza, despite implementing hardline pro-Israel policies while he was in office. But what he has said has put him squarely in line with a GOP base that is beginning to lose interest in the war, even as it maintains support for Israel. So, again, the majority of Republicans support Israel, right? Probably 80%, 80+% of Republicans will say, oh, absolutely, I support Israel. Okay, fine. But would they go to war for Israel? Would they support boots on the ground in the Golan Heights to support Israel in a war with Iran or in a war with Syria? Would they support boots on the ground to fight against Iran and Hezbollah and Syria all at the same time to defend Israel? No. Only a minority of Republicans would support that. And we all know which group those Republicans belong to. They belong to the evangelical loons, and they belong to the Zionist types, the AIPAC Zionist types. But even evangelical Christians are waking up to this stuff. They're waking up to this stuff. But you still have this remnant of evangelicals who are a part of this Hagee camp, this Hagee way of thinking. But luckily, that way of thinking is dying out. Military is there now. Listen, there are American vessels all over the place. That does not equal boots on the ground. We're talking boots on the ground, 50 calibers, Abram tanks, F-35s, whatever, whatever, technology in a war zone, actively fighting against other soldiers. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, oh, well, there's a base. Oh, well, there's this. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about serious military confrontation where soldiers are sent back to the Middle East to go fight a bunch of gremlins. Okay? The great majority of Americans do not support that idea. Okay? And recently, Trump has begun taking an increasingly hostile stance against Palestinians and their supporters in the U.S. So it says here that earlier this month, he reportedly told donors, AIPAC, behind closed doors, that he would pursue a zero-tolerance policy with respect to what he reportedly referred to as the radical revolution that has swept U.S. college campuses in recent months, saying he would have deported protesters who are not U.S. citizens. Okay, that is simply back scratching. That's all that is. I'm going to scratch your back, tell you about, oh, how much I don't like the protester. That doesn't mean anything. Plus, this, like the article specifies, what Trump said here still is in line with mainstream opinion within the Republican faction of America. While most Americans support Israel, while most Republicans support Israel, and while most Republicans are against the pro-Palestine rallies, most of those Republicans would be against a war to defend Israel. That's my whole point. We're not talking about rallies. We're not talking about quote-unquote support. We're talking about when it really matters. And that is supporting military intervention, American boots-on-the-ground policy to fight in a war alongside Israeli soldiers against an Iranian army alongside its proxies. That's what I'm talking about here. And the overwhelming majority of Americans would put their foots down and say, F that. And if that were not the case, then Tucker Carlson would not be as popular as he is right now. That's what I'm saying. Okay, moving on. So it says here, if you get me elected, this is what Trump told AIPAC. If you get me elected, and you should really be doing this, if you get me reelected, we're going to set that movement back 25 or 30 years. And that is bullshit. That's bullshit. And Trump knows it's bullshit. You can't get rid of a political movement just by saying you're going to get rid of a political movement or by trying to suppress a political movement. You can't do that. You can try, but you're not going to get rid of it. And listen, here's the thing. If America decides to become extremely harsh and violent towards people because they're pro-Palestine, the pro-Palestine movement wins. Because people in America would say, why are you doing that? Why are you beating people up? Why are you beating people up because they have Palestinian flags? Why are you beating people up like that? I'm not talking about people who are, and the reason why, I think the reason why a lot of Republicans are against the pro-Palestine rallies is because they do encampments. I think that's at least one of the biggest reasons. I think that's at least one of the biggest reasons why they're against the rallies, because they do these encampments. So they go to these universities, they do the encampments, which means that they camp out. They're camping out on university grounds, and they're saying free Palestine from the river to the sea, stop killing kids, and they just annoy people. So that's why a lot of Republicans are against those rallies. But if people do pro-Palestine rallies, and they do it in a legal way, where they're not doing encampments, they're simply going into main squares, they're going into city plazas, they're going into areas of universities where they can do demonstrations, and they're holding up their signs, and they're saying, free Palestine, stop killing kids, and they do that for some hours, and then they leave, and then they leave. I think a lot more people would be sympathetic to those rallies. And if those people are doing rallies in a legal way and in a way that's not obnoxious, where they're doing encampments, if they're not doing encampments, and then cops come over and beat the hell out of them, the pro-Palestine movement wins. Because then people would be saying, wait a second, those people are, they're observing their right to have free assembly, they're demonstrating legally, they're not bothering anybody, they're not violent, and they're still getting beaten up by cops, or they're getting beaten up by violent Zionist counter-protesters. In such a case, the pro-Palestine movement wins. Do you see? So Trump's not going to suppress jack diddly squat, okay? That's not going to happen. That's a bunch of garbage, and he knows it. He's tickling the ears of AIPAC, and that's all this is, and he knows it's bullshit. Now, check this out. This is the most important part of the article. At times, however, he, meaning Trump, has also been critical of the Israeli campaign. Critical of the Israeli campaign. When have we ever heard this from a Republican? When have we ever heard this from a Republican? Never. Republicans are always, go at them, Israel, get them, give them hell, kill kids, who gives a shit? Go kill civilians and then lie to people and say that you were killing terrorists. You thought the guy was holding an RPG. Go send your soldiers out, have them shoot mute elderly people, and then say, "Oh, I don't know, I thought he had a gun." Go out and drop white phosphorus and burn civilians alive. That's A-OK, because we can just say that, hey, Hamas human shields, blah blah blah. Who gives a shit, right? That's not what Trump is saying. That's not what Trump is saying. Trump is saying, Israel, you gotta get over it, Israel. You gotta wrap it up. Come on, this isn't looking good for you. He said Israel should, quote, get over it. ... Get back to peace and stop killing people. Oh, God. Oh, I love this guy. Oh, goodness. Trump has said this. He said, stop killing people, Israel. You got to stop it. It's getting a little crazy. It's getting crazy, Israel. It's getting a little crazy, Israel, don't you think? Don't you think it's getting a little too much? Oh, I love it. He's saying, stop killing kids. He sounds like a pro-Palestine protester. He's saying, you're killing kids. So he said, okay, so the article says, but he has also emphasized they, quote, have to have a victory, and implied that what's really the issue is that Israel is, quote, these are his words, absolutely losing the PR war. Israel is losing the PR war. And he's right. He's right. And the thing is, a lot of people are not going to vote for Biden because of the Israel issue. Yeah. Especially Michigan. Michigan's a big state, right? You got to win Michigan. Or I'm not sure how that is. But if you want to win Michigan, you got to get the Middle Eastern vote. The Middle Eastern vote is a big deal in Michigan. And you already have Middle Eastern people saying they're not going to vote for Biden in Michigan. And you have a lot of young people who are saying they're not going to vote for Biden because Biden has not stopped the slaughter. And you know what Trump is doing? Quiet. He's sitting back. He's just sitting back and watching it all unfold, watching the chaos happen. Why? Because he knows, well, if I start, believe me, there are people telling Trump this. He's saying, if I start going flamboyantly pro-Israel and telling the Israelis, kill them, get those hoodlums, get them desert savages, kill those kids, right? If I start telling people that, it's going to piss off a lot of people. It's even going to piss off people who are Republican. And if I start saying things like, you know, if Iran does anything, mark my words, we're gonna hit him. We're gonna hit him hard. You don't see Trump talking like that because he knows that if he did start talking like that, it would be detrimental to his campaign. So he's just sitting back. And he just said, Israel, you gotta stop. Wrap it up. That's what he's saying. He's saying, stop killing people. You're killing too many people and you're losing the PR war. It's not looking good for you. Biden has been critical of Israel, but Biden has also said that he supports Israel. Same thing with Blinken, Anthony Blinken. And and a lot of people look at Biden and say, Biden, how come America is still selling weapons to Israel? How come you're not putting a stop? You can put a stop to this, Biden. You can do it. You can save these freaking kids. But damn it, Biden, you haven't done a damn thing. And so it's not looking good for Biden. Biden is in between a rock and a hard place because he knows this doesn't look good for Israel. So he's saying, hey, Israel, don't attack Rafah. Israel attacks Rafah. So he's not looking strong in the face of Israel's military advancement. And at the same time, the United States is still supporting Israel. So no matter what, Biden's screwed when it comes to Israel. When it comes to the whole Gaza thing, Biden is screwed. Because if he criticizes Israel, well, then that's going to piss off AIPAC. Well, and then if he says, well, Israel, you have to stop, Israel's not going to listen. So he looks weak. And then he has to support Israel to please the thugs in AIPAC. So he's screwed when it comes to this issue. When it comes to this issue, he's screwed. What's Trump doing? Just standing back and watching. And that's what this article says. At the end of the article, it says, let me try to find the part here. It's just hilarious, guys. It's hilarious to watch. I find this so entertaining. Now, I understand. I don't want to see dead people. I don't like that. But I find it not entertaining is not a good word because it makes it sound like I'm making little of what's happening. But I find it super fascinating how the world is changing. I love it. I absolutely love it. I get a high off of this. I find this more fascinating than anything else. And I find it more invigorating than any alcohol, any tobacco. I find this more invigorating than any girlfriend. Honestly. Honestly, I read this stuff. I'm reading history. This is history. This is history that we're witnessing. We're seeing the Republican candidate saying, Israel, hey, press the brakes a little bit. Check this out. Let me get this article a little bit larger. Could you say you are elated? That's a good word. Yeah, elation. I'm elated. Because for so many years I've been reading history books and reading that and reading this and I'm thinking, man, how come nowadays nothing happens? Oh, it does. Oh, it does. Major shifts in society where people are just returning back to the ways of old, turning back to how things used to be. Because this whole pro-Israel thing, this is very new. Read history, guys. We're going to get into this. Read history. Read history. Read medieval history, Renaissance history. Read all of the history. Look at what was happening in regards to the relation between Jews and non-Jews in the first half of the 20th century. Look at how people saw Israel in the 1800s. It wasn't very friendly. The 1800s, look at Jewish history in the 1800s. Pogroms, propaganda, people spreading rumors about how evil Jews are. And then you go to the first half of the 19th century. We all know what happened in the first half of the 19th century. It goes without saying. Hitler, but then you have what the Ukrainians did to the Jews. You had all the anti-Jewish violence that was going on in Central and Eastern Europe. And that wasn't even the Islamic world. What's so ironic, guys, is that for so many decades we have been told, oh, all the Jew hatred, that comes from the Islamic world. That comes from the Islamic world. Right? It goes back to the Islamic world. The Muslims are the Jew haters. Then how come so much of the anti-Jewish violence was done in Christendom? How come so much of it was done in the Christian world in Western and Eastern Europe? I don't know about Northern Europe, but Southern Europe. You read about this also. Hatred against the Jews. It was there all throughout the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, France got rid of all of its Jews. Its entire Jewish population was purged out. The English did the same thing. The Spanish, they did persecution against their Jewish population, albeit it wasn't as violent as some people portray it as. Nonetheless, it was there. You can read about anti-Jewish violence in Russia. You can read about it taking place in Ukraine, in various parts of Eastern Europe, Romania. You read about it right there. And then you can go to the Middle East and you can read about what the Muslims did. I mean, the Muslims did do violence against the Jews, but it was going on a lot in the European world. But you can go to the Middle East and what do you read about? You read about, for example, when Ibn Ziyad invaded Spain, Tariq ibn Ziyad, he butchered, I want to say, around 3,000 Jews. I mean, that's a lot of people. In one massacre, 3,000 people dead. And that sort of thing was happening in Spain. This was happening in Spain, but it was done by Muslims nonetheless. But a lot of Jewish people went to the Islamic world because there was a lot of tolerance for the Jewish people. Now there were pogroms, there was violence, don't get me wrong, but there was also a lot of tolerance. Whereas in France, they just got rid of them. England got rid of them under Longshanks. And then you fast forward to post-World War II, and all of a sudden you have this pro-Israel phenomena. And the pro-Israel thing becomes very big in the United States, especially in the United States, but it also happened in Britain. Britain had a pro-Israel movement spark into existence, and it's still there in Britain, but nowhere near as big as it is in the United States. You see it in Canada, but the United States is the center of being pro-Israel. And it's unheard of, right? It's unheard of. It really is a very recent phenomena. It's a very recent phenomena. And the thing about recent phenomena that stick out like sore thumbs in the snowstorm of history is that they don't really last that long. Because if you put a recent phenomena against the wider trends that have been taking place throughout history, well, how can you expect that recent phenomena to last that long or to last forever when for most of modern history and for all of medieval history, you have had this negative view of the Jewish people and of Israel. So eventually this chocolate castle that the Zionists have built up in America is going to melt. But it's going to melt, not completely. It'll just melt down. You have a little chocolate bar, you have a few chocolate bars. But it's going to go down. Right? Because when you have, like I said, when you have a recent phenomena, something that is so unusual in the stream of history, you can't expect it to last forever, because what has existed for a substantial amount of time, for an enormous amount of time, is hatred against Jews. That has been very common throughout history. You see it in the Middle Ages, you see it in the Renaissance period, you see it in the 1800s, you definitely see it in the 1900s. And then we have this new phenomena after World War II of people loving Israel. And America is this country where people, generally speaking, support Israel. But that's declining. But you see, regardless of it being a recent phenomena, it exists almost solely in the United States. In Latin America, it's growing because of the evangelicals. But even if you go to Latin America, you will be, I don't want to say hard-pressed, but you will find that still a ton of people in Latin America hate Israel. They burned the Israeli embassy in Mexico not too long ago. And I lived in Mexico. And one thing that I noticed when I was in Mexico is that people hated Israel. Oh, yes. Oh, you're Palestinian. Oh, how nice. You're Israeli. They did not like Israel because they're part of that Latin revolutionary Che Guevara way of thinking that says free Palestine, to all power to the Palestinians to do a revolution. That's how they think. They love revolutionaries in Latin America. They do. They glorify revolutionaries. Zapata, Che Guevara, and a whole bunch of other ones who I don't remember. Latin America loves revolution. They love revolutionaries. They revere them. And when they see the Palestinians throwing rocks at tanks, well, that's a symbol of endearment for them. That's something to look up to. And that's why you go to Chile, you go to Argentina, you go to Mexico, you go to these countries, and you'll find people love Palestinians. Oh, they love them. They love Palestinians. And if you're a Palestinian guy and you want to go to a country where people love Palestinians, go to a Latin American country. Go find one. Chile, Argentina, go live there. They'll love you. And you'll fit right in because you guys, they look kind of alike. Palestinians, Latin Americans, they look kind of alike. Just learn some Spanish. They love you. Oh, they love you. Trust me. I lived in Mexico. They love Middle Eastern people in Mexico. I mean, they don't love Islam necessarily, but they like Middle Eastern people. They get along for the most part. But this idea of being pro-Israel, it's a very new thing. You know, being pro-Jew, I support the Jewish people. This way of talking is very recent. It's only been around for a number of decades. It's only been around really since the end of the Second World War. This phenomena of Zionism in America, Christian Zionism. These are all very new things. In the face of medieval history or 19th century history, 20th century history, this is very new. And so when you have something that's so new and out of place in the greater scheme of history, you can't expect it to last that long. It's going to go down. Right? I'm not saying it's going to disappear completely, but it's going to go down. And you go to this article that was published by Vox. Let me just read it for you guys here. So it says here, Trump's political calculation on Gaza. During his first term, Trump was one of the most pro-Israel U.S. presidents. He was. He was probably the most pro-Israel president we've had. Well, I don't know about that one because we had, there was, who was it? Was it Nixon who gave all the weapons to the Israelis to fight the Arab countries? But he's definitely one of the most pro-Israel presidents, right, we've ever had. As far as rhetoric goes, I would say he is the most pro-Israel president America's ever had, as far as rhetoric. He recognized Israel's controversial annexation of the Golan Heights and the country's capital as Jerusalem, despite the fact that control of Jerusalem has been a sticking point in negotiations, etc., blah, blah, blah. I already read this stuff. So it says here, it's notable that Trump hasn't chosen to highlight the war as a top campaign trail issue. He has not. Isn't that interesting? It's one of the biggest news topics in the world, and he hasn't really focused too much on it. I'm telling you why. Because the people around him are saying, Trump, this is not a fight for you. Stay out of it. This is not a smart fight to get involved in. And that's likely because he senses where the electorate is at. The fact remains that the war in Gaza isn't a determinative electoral issue for the vast majority of voters, and even Republicans have soured on it. A majority now support a permanent ceasefire and de-escalation of violence, even as they still hold favorable views of Israel. Isn't that funny? Isn't that interesting? I remember when I was growing up, we would go to church and they would pray for Israel and have the whole Israel thing, night to honor Israel. They would bring rabbis to the church. I remember they even had this ensemble of singers, Jewish a cappella singers, to sing for the church. They would have Jewish Israeli officials coming over for fundraisers. I mean, it was all there. And I remember watching the news and hearing about how, 85, 90% of American Christians support Israel. And now you have the candidate, the nominee for the Republican Party, stepping back and being quiet when it comes to Israel. And this is the biggest war that Israel has been in years, arguably, obviously. This is after Israel has had supposedly its biggest massacre since the Holocaust, the biggest massacre of Jews, the biggest pogrom of Jews since the first half of the 20th century. And the nominee for the Republicans is staying quiet when the Israelis are going full Amalek on the Gazans? Wake me up. Tell me I'm dreaming. Tell me I'm dreaming. I'm sorry, I'm elated by this. This is greater than any drug, greater than any alcohol, greater than any tobacco, greater than any girlfriend. It doesn't matter. It's nothing. This is crazy. Because that with which we have become so accustomed is going down. It's all going down, and history is returning. History is returning. Let's go back to this article. It's also probably in Trump's interest not to say more because the issue is already splintering the Democratic base without any help from his campaign. So Trump knows if I start supporting Israel and start saying, go at them, kill kids, he'll lose some Republicans. He's going to lose a chunk of the Republicans. He doesn't want to do that. And he's already seeing how a lot of Democrats are hating on Biden because Biden is supposedly not strong enough against Israel. And you know what that means? That means a lot of Democrats are not going to vote for Biden. And because Trump said, hey, Israel, you got to stop killing people, they might vote for Trump. So this is strategic. Trump is saying, this is what I am pontificating here. Trump is saying, I'm not going to go full out balls to the wall in support for Israel. because if I do, I might lose a chunk of my Republican voting bloc. On the other hand, you have Biden, who's already losing a chunk of the Democrats because he is not stopping Israel. And if Trump starts becoming balls on the wall in support for Israel, he might lose those. He might lose the chance for those Democrats to vote for Trump, because a lot of Democrats are saying they're not going to vote for Biden. Well, they might vote for Trump. And if Trump starts going full out in support for Israel, he might lose those potential voters. That's what I'm thinking here. This is the strategy that I think is occurring here. I could be wrong, but this is what I think is happening here, because Trump is very pro-Israel. He was very pro-Israel when he was running for president the first time. He was very pro-Israel as a president. So for him to be quiet, he's an old fox. He's not a stupid guy. He's strategizing. That's what I'm thinking. And what I'm thinking is he's seeing Democrats saying they're not going to vote for Biden. He's going to keep quiet in the hopes that they're going to vote for him. You see, but it seems that Trump does see the U.S. Now, here's another interesting point in this article. But it seems that Trump does see the U.S. political discourse around the war, rather than the war itself, as a winning issue. Trump has loudly condemned the anti-war protests, meeting his base where they are. Again, meeting his base where they are. Plurality of Republican voters approve of universities' efforts to clamp down on the protests, et cetera, et cetera. But it says here, Trump can afford to sit back while Biden walks a tightrope on Gaza. Biden's base is still largely pro-Israel, but his support has plummeted among younger voters, a key demographic he needs to win, and one that tends to have a more positive view of Palestine than older voters. Juggling their interest has proved challenging. The president has said that he is listening to the demands of protesters on college campuses, but aside from at times critical words, he has stood by Israel as its leaders face possible arrest warrants for war crimes, etc., etc. So it says here, according to May polling from the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, only 7% of Arab Americans are currently planning to vote for Biden. So there's going to be a big boycott for voting for the Democrat Party this election amongst Arab voters. There's going to be a big boycott. A lot of the Arabs aren't going to vote. All these Middle Eastern people in Michigan, they're not going to vote for Biden. They might vote for Trump. They might vote for Trump. And Trump doesn't want to lose those voters. Okay. See, they might decide to vote for Trump anyway because they believe it will be easier to mobilize Democratic opposition to the war if a Republican is in the White House. And this is true. I think this is a good point. If you see, because you have a Democrat in office and you have liberals and leftists protesting against Israel, well, it's hard to get other liberals to join their ranks because those liberals support Biden and they don't want to go against their guy because they hate Donald Trump. If you have Trump in office, then you can mobilize all of the left, generally speaking, against Trump. Because in that situation, rallying and protesting against Israel would be rallying against Trump. So in that case, it would be much easier to get more people, leftists or liberals, Democrats, to join the ranks of the protesters, to join the demonstrations against Israel. Because like I said, because Biden is in office, how can you get more Democrats to rally in support for Palestine if Biden is in office? And a lot of Democrats don't want to join the demonstrations because they don't want to go against their guy. But if you have Trump, we can get more Democrats to join the demonstrations because then by joining the demonstrations, they would be going against their arch enemy, Trump. I hope that makes sense. So that's why some people are thinking that these people who are pro-Palestine are going to vote for Trump, because then by having Trump in office, it'll be easier to mobilize people in support for Palestine. So there's that. And then I want to show you guys these charts here. This is very fascinating. Check this out. Now, there's a series of charts here that shows you where a lot of Americans are at in regards to Israel and Gaza, but I just want to show you guys a couple from here because they really are quite telling. It says here, okay, so this is probably the most important one. A majority of voters think an escalation of Israeli-Iranian conflict should see little to no U.S. involvement. So that's the question, right? All likely voters, if you look at all likely voters, so this would include Democrats, Republicans, independents, third-party people, in the characterization or in the category of all likely voters, 36% of all likely voters say that they are completely against the idea of American intervention to support Israel in a war. 39% of Democrats are completely against the idea of American intervention in a war to support Israel. Whereas 10% of Democrats say that they would want America to be very involved in a war for Israel. Well, we all know which group these Democrats belong to. They belong to the AIPAC group. And then if you look, I don't care about third parties because they don't really matter, I'll be honest with you. If you look at the category of Republican, 29% of Republicans say that they are against completely the idea of America being involved in a war to support Israel. So no matter which faction you look at, Democrat or Republican, it's still the majority of the people saying that they are against a war to support Israel. Do you see what I'm saying? So the support is going down. It's the idea of intervention for Israel is declining. But even if you look at the other questions, so for example, the idea of giving military aid in the billions of dollars to Israel, support for this is also going down. A plurality of voters disapprove of Congress authorizing $4 billion in aid to replenish Israel's missile systems. So if you look at Democrats, 28% strongly disapprove of America replenishing Israel's missile systems. 22%. Now with the Republicans, it's different. In the Republican faction, 27% strongly approve of basically arming Israel, whereas 22% of Republicans military aid to Israel. When thinking about U.S. funding for military aid and weapons for Israel, do you think the U.S. should increase funding, decrease funding, or keep it as it is? 42% of Democrats say that funding should be decreased. 28% of Republicans say that the funding should be decreased. But again, another 28% of Republicans believe that funding should be increased for Israel. So the Republicans are somewhat split on this. But nonetheless, 28% is a substantial number. Student protesters, I'm not going to get into that because we all know what people think about that. Do you support or oppose the U.S. calling for a permanent ceasefire? This is also interesting. I'll make this bigger for you guys. Hold on. Look what it says here. Permanent ceasefire. 51% of Democrats strongly support a permanent ceasefire. 29% of Republicans strongly support a permanent ceasefire. 27% of Republicans somewhat support a permanent ceasefire, which means that they support a ceasefire. I somewhat support that. That's an American way of saying yes. A lot of Americans are afraid to say what they really think. Let's be real here. So, no matter how you look at it, it's a big chunk of the U.S. population that is not really gung-ho, Speedy Gonzales supporting Israel. A lot of them aren't. It's declining, everybody. So a lot of the Israelis, I think they have realized that the show is about to end. I'm not saying it's all going to happen next year, but it's going down, guys.